Go.
Yes, it's going. It's recording.
Okay. Okay, so I'll just wait 5 seconds and and you can edit it out later.
Yep.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is an audio recording and podcast about the book Freemaking by Aurel Lyra. This is the second book by Aurel, the first book being Hologenics, and I hope you will get the chance to read that if you haven't read it. I have known Aurel in his various incarnations for a good time now, and we are both looking forward to this opportunity to discuss the second book. Full disclosure, I'm here with my 5-year-old son in lockdown in Kew Gardens, and it is Monday 25th of May 2020, and the government has asked us all to stay at home and enjoy the weather.
Yeah, they have. And I am. It's fantastic. I'm here in Exmoor at the moment, and the sun is beaming down. It still gets down to about 3 or 4 degrees at night, so it's almost freezing. So you have to wait a little bit until it warms up. But of course, it's rainy and miserable a lot of the year round. But summertime comes and it just starts buzzing and blooming. It's fantastic. I'm having a lovely time. How are you, Alastair?
I'm good, and within that context, we are going to be dipping in and out of what's happening
I'm good too.
in the world today. That's my son Amadeus, because I think a lot of what prompted me to talk to you today in this format is the remarkable coincidence of changes being brought about by the current lockdown for COVID-19 and some of the passages that you refer to in your text. And we'll get to perhaps the key one in due course, but it's going to be an interesting discussion, and I think it's an interesting time to look afresh at some ideas which perhaps have been in the ether for some time, although not as clearly expressed as in the book, and are maybe coming to fruition. There is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. So we've got some passages. We're going to read out some passages from the book, and these will prompt discussion. The first passage we've got is a discussion of the Portuguese Manowar.
Right. Okay. While I'm looking for that section, I just want to mention to you, just to pick up on something you just said, the book was launched on the 20th of February 2020. So I look into patterns and numbers, and that's depending on which country you live in. There's lots of 2s and 0s in there. It's 2, 20, 2020, something like that. So that was the exact day that the stock market crash of 2020 was initiated. So I saw that happening and watched it go by and tried to make a note of it. Manowar 323. This was very fun to write. I enjoyed this one very much because I heard about it somewhere, and it just seemed to sum up so much, everything being visual imagery. Okay, so the Portuguese Man-O-War. The Portuguese Man-O-War is not a jellyfish, although it looks like one. It is a hydrozoan composed of 4 individual polyp life forms, all acting together with a sensational indigo and pink color scheme. One handles the air-filled sail, another the stingers, another the digestion, and a final polyp for reproduction. This is teamwork. All parts are different, all contribute, all benefit. No polyp is exploited by another polyp. None is taken for granted. None have their time or resources used without consent. It is an efficient, self-regulating community of ocean wayfarers dedicated to expressing an utterance of beautiful functionality. None of the polyps could live beyond the community, and the community could not live without even one of its constituent members. They are in it together until they wash up on the beach of forever. And that's like us, the humans. We function with each other. But when that function is corrupted, the organism dies. Let's stop creating giant, species-wide exploitative cults and instead invite synchronized symbiosis as our model of being. Starve the cults, remove your consent, your money, your time. Let them collapse. The price of the new life we will have is the old life we had. Find your polyps, humanoids, synthesize a group utterance and float the ocean blue. Have an authentic experience of reality. What else are you planning on doing?
I love that last line. What else were you planning on doing? Because now,
what else? Yeah.
A plain snack.
All bets are off. I've just had my flight to Germany cancelled by the airlines. There are no more flights till the 15th of June. What else were you planning on doing? So let's get our heads into this. You say none of the polyps could live beyond the community, and the community could not live without even one of its constituent members. And this is a bold, bold statement. Can you expand on that?
Well, everything in nature is a kind of symbolism. It's all a kind of language that has evolved over time under natural conditions to explain certain things to us, to reflect certain secrets about our own functionality, which we may have forgotten about in getting involved with ego and all the rest of it. So let me just wander off in this direction a bit, because it's the first thing in my mind. Another example, and it's also ocean related, for this kind of symbolism is a shell. Now, if you look at a shell on a beach, and it's, you go and find one which is a little bit worn away, you can see the pattern inside. You see this kind of spiraling design that goes through the center of this shell. It's known as a hyperbolic toroidal helix or something like that. I can't quite remember, but certainly hyperbolic toroidal. It's a natural function, and it is caused by the way this sea creature has evolved at the shoreline, and it's the way it makes it its house. It turns out that in the big scale, when you look at vaster structures in the universe, something like gravity also adopts this hypertoroidal effect. So this hyperbolic toroidal effect. So things aren't attracted to a planet or a great big lump of rock in space in a single direction. They don't just zoom straight in. If you measure the different forces, it's this big spiraling thing. So the nature of gravity is expressed to us in a tiny form that you can hold in your hand. And you walk along the beach and say, well, what has made this? This has been crafted by nature. This has been crafted by the action of waves upon the sand and the movement of air and creatures and all these things. These are all natural processes. What would happen to humans if we allowed ourselves simply to be massaged by the natural processes of flow and change, which we seem to have wandered off from entirely? Not entirely, but we just have that we're so focused on these mental accomplishments that we've forgotten how to be what we have come here to be. So to take it from there, back to the polyps, everything is trying to show us something. The thing I liked about the polyps was that it sounds a little bit like communism. It's like we're all here together, we all play a function, but no one's really in charge. They're all these different animals that are living together. They've obviously developed a function for sticking together as one. They're not so disparate that they can't communicate and be together, but they are separate functioning organisms. Why can't we be like this? What I noticed when I was writing this section.
I'm going to cut in there, but ironically, it also sounds a little bit like Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, which is the founding text of industrial capitalism, because Adam Smith said, let hat makers make the hats. And you've got these four community members, the specialist sail, the specialist digestion polyp, the stingers, and the reproduction polyp. And I think Adam Smith, fun enough, would have said, you don't need the guy with the sail to also be catching the fish. Let the sailor sail and let the fisherman fish. And you've got that efficiency of community there. So it does seem to be an organizing principle of human nature.
Mm-hmm.
I think you go further in it, though. I mean, and this must be correct for the polyp, but the community could not live without even one of its constituent members. And I think that view would not be echoed by the political structures of the modern day.
They're usable. It's a throwaway culture. You use somebody up and throw it away. Yeah.
You use people up and throw them away.
Yeah.
And it reminds me a little bit of this consensus sort of anthropology around American Indians, where it's said, and this is not my field, but it's said that American Indians had to or have to do everything by consensus. Everyone has to agree to install a water filter in the lake, otherwise it doesn't happen. Whereas we have this majoritarian culture at best, where we push ahead with things, and those who dissent. And I'm not opining an opinion, but can you dig deeper into this idea that?
Well, let me take this over then and just tell you where it came from. I was looking for artwork for the cover of the book, and the people that I had used before or were just not showing up with the goods. It turns out that they were not there for that time. It was a different thing that needed to happen. So I was bereft because I've got no money and I'm just hanging out. I can't pay anyone to do any artwork for me. And out of the internet came 3, 4, 5 people who simply said, by the way, I listened to your talk, whichever one it was, and I really like what you're doing. Do you need any help? This guy from Texas, Nicky Zervos, just showed up out of the blue and said, yeah, I can do the graphics for you. So he really masterminded the cover design. And a guy who lives in the Canary Islands, Jorge Abelo, he did the Mandelbulb for the cover. These people just appeared. And the visual I had was, it was rather like a snowflake. So there was this kind of sense of the message had to be done, and all these different polyps or the arms of the snowflake came in and just suddenly appeared and took on crystalline form and were absolutely the right people at the right time. And I thought to myself, okay, is this the way we need to get things done from now on? Because all the systems that have been presented to us previously, just look at any politician ranting from the podium, and you'll see they're uniquely ill-adapted to that particular role. And when they try and get together as a team to say something, they can't say anything. This is another example of how not to do it. Somehow the polyps and the snowflake, it happens so organically. And nobody needs to be in charge. Nobody's having an argument about strategy meetings or anything like that. It just appears. This is somehow the natural appearance manifestation process of the universe, just like the shell showing the processes of the larger functions of the gravity effect, and off in space somewhere. You can watch it in your hand from the beach. Same thing with everything. Once you start to notice the scaled fractal resonances with absolutely everything that happens in life, you can start to build a map of the way things work. And it's not really, since I got into a place of real solitude and quiet the last couple of years, to get out of the life I lived in London, I lived in Tokyo, I lived all over the place. I lived in America for a number of years. Once all the noise has gone down, you start to be able to be very, very sensitive about the messages you're getting from very, very subtle things. For example, just another little one, we'll end this a little bit in a minute, but I have just been completely reconfiguring my succulent collection. This sounds a little bit strange, but I had put in these long elongated containers lots of different kinds of succulents. And there was something a bit wrong with it, but it was too noisy in my life to realize what was going on. And finally I realized that all these plants are competing with each other in the same trough. And some of them are stronger than others, and some of them are getting crowded out, and some of them aren't getting a chance, and some of them are taking too much space and light. And I realized that they really just wanted their own space. So I'm listening to plants now, and that is a very satisfying place to be. So symbolism, basically. Is that enough? Is that what you were looking for?
Yeah, but this is throwing up a couple of things. And for the listeners, I've looked up hyperbolic toroidal helix seashell, and I think it's what most people would refer to as a nautilus. It's that
not quite
spiral
not quite.
seashell. No,
the nautilus is like a snail shell, right?
Okay, yeah.
But I'm talking about the inside spine, the very central part of one that is, it's like a mathematical construct of a spiral that just winds down a single pole in the middle. So nautilus, it may be the same thing. But what I'm thinking of, you get any other kind of shell you find on a beach that is sort of more lengthwise, You know what I mean?
What
Anyway, it's that style.
What's coming up for me is two things.
Yeah.
One, what would happen if we did allow ourselves to grow naturally, right? And I'm going to ask you to hold that in your head, right?
Okay.
And two, is it fear that's blocking us, right? So those two questions are the yin and yang of my response to this, which is, are people afraid of allowing their lives to be shaped by this invisible, natural, gravitational force that sort of spirals water into the bath plug and must be around us? And, what do we do with that? Is it fear? Is it something else? What do we do, and how do we get over it?
You want me to unfuzz this cluster fuzz? All right, let's try it. What comes up for me? Yes, it looks like it's about fear, but it's an imprecise kind of anxiety. Somewhere in the book, on a number of occasions, I managed to hone in on something that has been obsessing me, and I don't know whether I've been able to say it clearly enough, but there's essentially this tension to life where everybody is anxious, and it looks like it's about death. We want to get as much done as we can, and we want to get as much enjoyment or as much value out of life before you die, and then you die and it's terrible and it's all sad. It's
He's not afraid to make noise.
Let me follow it up here. Hang on a second.
Well, but actually, just stay on that point. It reminds me of something you wrote about that, which was something along the lines of people will destroy themselves and each other in order to uphold the systems that they built to avoid death.
Yes.
And I'm phrasing badly.
Yes. Okay. That's paraphrase. That's what it is. I've extended it. It's not actually death. To me, it looks like, I keep going on about this secession about black holes. There's a kind of underground knowledge on the lowdown. As humans, we know that we're somehow immortal. We cannot conceive of a world beyond 3 dimensions, but we know somehow we exist in another dimension. Otherwise, how else do you make sense of where you go at night in your dreams and the stories that unfold there? It's a different place. But somehow, when you are experiencing this world of 3-dimensional occurrences and all the causality that happens in here, you get nervous, and there's a sense of being so wrapped up in the ego that you try and prove that you're here. So this is where we get all of these exponential avenues of humans attempting to prove that they're here, because they have this sense of anxiety about the event horizon, what lies beyond. So they are continually trying to prove things. We try and leave our mark. We have children. We build brand names. We try and get something proved. And of course, we're leading ourselves further and further into a state of extreme anxiety, instead of just being here now, which is a huge task for anyone to even conceive. We don't even know what being here now means, because we're so wrapped up in the distractions. That's what I sense about people being afraid of death, is that there's this urge towards somehow manifesting and completing, but we're doing all these things with manifestation engines within ourselves that are somehow, I'm going to use the word torque, as in TORQUE, as in they're twisted, they're pushed to produce things which seem like they're going to make our lives a better place, but actually we are disinheriting ourselves by using them. So look at the way the planet is going at the moment, and this is the strategy we've used so far. And we continue to attempt to press the pedal to the metal even harder and say, no, I'm sure that one more F-16 is going to fix this entire situation. And this being here now stuff is just for hippies and drug takers. I mean, these people are ridiculous.
This ties into, I think, the next passage we have, which is be realistic, because that phrase be realistic, I think, has been thrown into doubt globally. I think for the first time ever.
Yes.
The entire world, and we've been browsing the history of plagues, which swept, from Mongolia across to Europe, indeed, but also missed out large chunks of the world, Africa or whatever at the time. And yet we have the entire world reframing the phrase "be realistic," and I think that's a great springboard into hearing the "be realistic" vignette and then discussing what we've just discussed in that light as well. So go ahead.
Okay. Be realistic. Each time you are told to be realistic, someone is putting you in a box. It's for your own good. So shut up. It's a version of reality where your experience is censored by somebody else's. The reality to which you are being told to submit is not your own. The limits enforced upon you are not of your own making. You know that what is real is whatever you choose it to be. Be realistic is a forceful takeover attempt. Be realistic is a suffocation of what you are and what you have come here to do. It is a delay tactic, a red herring, a distraction. It is a weapon fabricated to deceive. There will never be a world without guns. Be realistic. Deforestation is inevitable. Be realistic. Greed is endemic and always will be. Come on, be realistic. Being realistic in this way is killing off all plant and animal life on Earth. Being realistic is a phony. The nature of the human experience has been one of containment, but it's not anymore. When you are told to be realistic, you are being told to remain in the forgetful state of the third dimension. You're being told to stay, to continue the illusion. They forgot that we are unlimited. We live in the predicament while our heart's desires to leave it. We are all waiting for the spinning disc to resolve its cadence and come to rest. We live in the incompleteness, forging temporary structures and watching them crumble. Human culture has built an apparatus which continues to eviscerate the fertile earth, and yet we still complain that it is not enough. We take life while pretending to appreciate and protect it. We call this being realistic. Let go of being realistic. Vast herds of brainwashed humans roam the planet, encouraged on all sides to uphold the insanity of a culture designed for suffering. Billions of cheats, liars, and frauds explain away the necessity for destruction as being an unavoidable byproduct of living. Be realistic. Jet skis are cool. The mantra has been used your whole life to coax you into folly, in order to satisfy someone else's psychosis, a psychosis which was forced upon them and those who came before them. They became so convinced that they betrayed themselves. They were not strong enough, not clear enough to change it. But for you, the cycle is broken. You are free. Let go. The gentleness of spirit which dwells within you is your true home. That is the jewel fought over by generations of humans, unaware that the prize is at their own center. No one may tell you what to do, how to think, or how to feel. Your journey to the center is paramount, and no one but you knows the way. You may now cease being realistic. You can be whatever you need to be in order to fulfill the prophecy of appearing as yourself in the lensing chamber. Only you know what that is, deep, deep inside you, in a place that knows all things and all outcomes. You are making decisions for authenticity. These decisions will always override the surface decisions made by convenience or coercion. The deepest decisions are honest. The deepest decisions will always lead you to emancipation. You will become so free that you will barely be here at all. Your presence will be as light as a stream of ideas, a visible, spoken blessing. Letting go doesn't mean dying. It means staying here as a portal. It means giving up on life so you can finally be in it.
That was beautiful. And now it reminds me, and this is the mundane response to something quite profound.
It's all connected. It's all the same thing.
Yeah. I've heard some comments from women in the workplace who are saying to each other and their male colleagues, they've stopped wearing makeup for the Zoom calls, wearing makeup for the video conferences. Be realistic, or be realistic. So if you had to predict here mid lockdown in Britain, how this realism is gonna spin in a different direction, because I think it will from now on. I mean, everyone almost is accepting it's not. There's going to be the new normal, right? So there's going to be the new realistic. Just three things, just for the record, so that you can look back and say, "Well, told you so." If you get one right, three things that you think will become, if you take the optimistic case, the realism of the golden future.
Wow. I think the first thing in terms of being realistic is we will realize that the models and structures we have been using are actually rubbish, or not so much rubbish, but, you know, the amount of effort and waste in creating one billionaire is just, you know, there's people running economies that say that they know about economies, but the kind of energetic input required to make one billionaire or one of those F-16s at $300 million is just completely unfeasible. I think we're going to stop being realistic with leaders. So once we got over the fact that where we are has not been a useful strategy, we'll look at all the leaders. I mean, right now, looking at the numbers for coronavirus 25th of May, the top three countries which are suffering are the strongman countries. You've got America, Brazil, and Russia all at the top. Every single one of those leaders has told the country he represents that this is nothing to worry about. And I think this is just proof. You know, we will start to see, not through because suddenly everyone's getting enlightened, just because we're under a squeeze and we're being put through the filter. And certain incredibly inefficient, deceitful ways of functioning are now being shown up. There's a certain kind of inflorescence, which I think is to be encouraged. You know, I look at the orange guy in America. I won't say his name because I can't bear it. But you know, he's almost like a necessity. This is a function of the planet. It's almost like he doesn't exist. He's a holographic representation of enough people's ideas of what life should be about that they'll put an entity like that in sort of some form of control, or at least as a figurehead. I mean, he's the golden boy. He's the shining poster boy of that generation and that kind of thinking. The way I think we need to be grateful for him, and I know it's tricky to find a way to be grateful for that, but is that he is very his architecture is very open. You can see what he's thinking and what he's doing. You can see the lies as they are born somewhere and make their way to his mouth and the microphone and the way he's twisting. So he's showing us all the tricks of, and I'm not a psychiatrist, so I will not mention that I would say that he's a malignant, narcissistic psychopath. I won't even mention that just to avoid any legal difficulties. So that's great. But you can see from the way he functions that is his programming. There's just a little bit about him. I don't want to spend too much time talking about him, but there was a story. You remember Selena Scott from the 80s? She was a TV presenter. You probably remember her.
I don't remember her.
You don't? Well, it's quite a long time ago. Anyway, she was very, very famous, really, at the time. I think it was late 80s. And she did an interview with the Orange Man's mother. And she was just glowing with praise for him and told a story about him when he was a kid. And him and his brother both got given lots of wooden blocks. And they enjoyed playing with these blocks. But at some point, the orange one, he got some glue and he stole his brother's blocks. And he glued them together into some structure with his own. And I think this was the same brother that died of alcoholism. Not quite sure which one it was. But that is the structure of the psychiatry we're dealing with. That is what we think of as being a winner. And there are enough people in the population of planet Earth who think all this kind of strong-arm, selfish stuff is somehow beneficial. But yes, it's just a function of fear. So to bring it back to your original question, you asked me to do 3 things that might be changed. I think I've told you one of them. I think our attitudes to leadership will change. But also, I think we will step up as people and recognize that we are mature human beings and everyone has a responsibility. Another thing I would like to say is perhaps I think we are being sobered in general for what is about to come. I think this is just the beginning, and whether it's going to be another wave, we could be in this little quiet space before the next massive wave comes of virus. But if it's not virus, it's going to be something else. This has been brewing for a long time. Lots of people have been saying, when is it going to break? Like, when is this sense of tension going to break? And we have every player in the game to thank for this. Perhaps these strong arm leaders are the ones to be thankful for, because they're bringing a sense of tension rather than us just being comfortable and saying everything's fine, we can do what we want. The last thing I'd like to mention, I'm not sure if it's number 3 or what, but I think we may start to review the way we spend our lives and the way we spend our money. For example, typically people in Britain will go for 3, perhaps 4 holidays a year to Turkey, Greece, something like that, which is based upon the fact that Britain has a certain kind of position and a certain kind of access to the power of money and the power of this and the other. I met a woman in a pharmacy the other day, and she was saying to me, I work hard. I deserve to have my holidays. That's why I work. And I said, yeah, but it needs to be reviewed, because that whole system is just destroying the planet. You're only going to be able to do that for a few more years and then it's all over. And I realized after I'd left her that there's a guy in Bangladesh doing her job in some version of a pharmacy over there, and he does not have access to even a passport. Never mind 3 trips to Turkey to go and stay in a hotel every year, something like that. So this idea of working hard, I think, needs to be reviewed as well, the way we spend our money. And one last thing, I think something that might change is the way we breed. I would like to see that change. The current Prime Minister of the UK has 6 children, and he still talks about carbon footprints, and this is the year where we're going to get green. And he's still breeding more children. It's the one thing that is going to be the heaviest impact, is the number of people that are here. It's a very tricky subject. No one wants to talk about it because, well, for obvious reasons, it's very sensitive and people are going to get very bent out of shape. But I think eventually we'll get pressed through this filter, through this funnel, so that it will just sort of become self-evident that larger families are perhaps not even psychologically, it's something that people want to get involved in. That will do down that particular avenue. What's next?
We've all experienced on the first half an hour of this podcast the psychological toll of having even one 5-year-old. So,
but as a parent, he's special, so it's okay, right?
Imagine 6 of them. So.
Just as a little sub note to that, it's not that I'm saying, oh, I hate kids and we should have less of them, we're going to try and kill them or something. No. Everyone that's here is supposed to be here. I just think we need to come to a point of, sort of clarity with, wow, it's really, really crowded, and that's not helping anything at all.
Sort of a population nationalism akin to Brexit for the entire planet. No new souls on the planet, please. So, I mean, I want to throw something back at you there, actually, which I think is very interesting here. What if the natural ordering of things that you've talked about, with regard to your seashells, is really what needs to happen? What if it's not the number of people, the number of kids, but the way in which the atoms are organized, the atoms of society, the 10 billion or so people on this planet, are we simply not spiraling in the right direction? And if we did, as all 10 billion, following the invisible lines of the gravitation or the whatever it is, curves that affect us, would things not just fit into place? And if you think that's possible, what would it actually look like to you? I mean, beyond this transition phase which you've described well, what's the end game? What is society going to look like if we all take a dose of hologenic freemaking in 2020?
Well, that's the beauty of it. We don't know. All of our plans have been based upon the structures which we have used to climb out of the slime and go through being, trees and dinosaurs and make all our way to being Homo sapiens. So all of our structures are based on this logical, what we think of as being logical. I think the first thing we need to do is say goodbye to the past, and not as in it's over, we hate it, but just we cannot function anymore in that kind of manner. Are we going to end up all living in communes, in vegetarian communes, and having orgies every Saturday night? I certainly hope so. Is it going to happen? I don't know. There's enough people with guns and politics in their mind that are going to be a continual thorn in the side. But I think the process is already in place, and we needn't ultimately pay too much attention to, I don't want to sound flippant about this, but the suffering and agony, because somehow it's part of the process. It's part of the emancipation. If you didn't have this squeeze, I tell you what, there's a story, I think it was David Icke who told it at one point, where he was a child and he was watching a butterfly come out of the chrysalis. And he was having a bit of a hard time. You know, these things are tight. And it was kind of just putting a leg through and a couple of feelers, trying to get its head out. And he's like, oh, yeah, I got to help this. I got to help this process. And he got in there and just kind of opened it up a little bit so that the dude could crawl out. What he didn't realize was that the squeeze in coming out of the pupa was necessary, because that pushes out it eliminates all the bioproducts that was used in the formulation of going from a caterpillar to a butterfly. So becoming a squishy little worm and turning into a hard-skinned, colorful flying insect. There's a complete breakdown, like all of the materials just turn into soup. And when it turns out that it's an insect, it has to squeeze that stuff out of its body. It has to squeeze the liquid out of its wings. Otherwise, its wings don't open up in the sunshine. They just like soggy blotting paper kind of thing. So this thing crawled out and essentially died, or at least had its life curtailed by what he'd done. So you have to go through this process of squeeze. And I think the universal process is showing us the orange man in America. Oh, by the way, the one more thing, just as a pattern that I picked up, and no one else is talking about it, but I think it gets sidelined a lot and sort of marginalized because it has to do with astrology. But I just want to mention, while we're talking about the orange man, he has blonde hair. The premier in the UK also has blonde hair, right? Boris. Now, they're both privileged, both overweight, both blonde. But here's the thing that I'm finding fascinating, that really says to me that they are somehow linked, because they came around at the same time, right? As part of the same kind of flood of, MAGA hats and Brexit and all that stuff. They are both Geminis, both the orange man in America and the blonde fella in 10 Downing Street. They're both Geminis. And that's not a slight against Geminis, because I have a lot of Gemini in my chart, a lot of Leo and Gemini. But it just exemplifies the twins aspect. I'm going to suggest that they are somehow linked, and if one falls, the other will fall. It's a setup. What we're watching is Commedia dell'arte. What we're watching is a Christmas. What are those shows that come on at Christmas, and it's like, oh, he's behind you. Those ones. What are they called? You go to the Hippodrome, and it's a pantomime. Yeah, that's it. That's what we're watching. I think it's just a matter of watching the characters portray what they have to do, but somehow it's written by some Shakespearean bard in hyperspace who knows what the outcome is, and is carefully feathering in all of these different modes and information and styles. So eventually it's going to reach a kind of crucial point where everything will become clear. I'm okay with it. I think we also do have a responsibility to be more vocal. I have decided to be more vocal, which is why I'm talking to you right now. I'm not happy sitting on the sidelines. I wanted to at least say something. So I think it's up to us to convince, at least make the dream real and make it normal and normalize the salvation of the planet, rather than, just resigning ourselves to 3 holidays in Turkey every year so you can go and shit in someone else's sewers.
I want to cut in there because really your end game is this re-greening of the planet. That's where correct me if I'm wrong, but I've been through the book a few times now, once all the way through, and then the other times smashing in and out. But what I can see is, if there is an end game, that you don't predict it, because you think it's a choice that we have to make.
Exactly.
But you say effectively it's either going to be a re-greening of the planet or extermination. I'm sure Elon Musk would say there's a middle way, which is the few of us lucky enough to get on that ticket to Mars, go out there. But Jane Goodall, on Masterclass, saying, this is potentially all over. And so you're ringing that I don't know what you call it, but it's the choice point. It's a choice point where you sit down with the patient or the client and you say, look, you're either going to stop doing this harmful activity and you've got a chance of rehabilitation, but you're going to have to jog every day and you're going to have to stop drinking, smoking, overeating, whatever.
Yeah.
Or you're going to die. And it's almost like, you're the doctor there. But as far as you can see, just getting from you, but it's one or the other. Is that where we've come to in 2020?
I think it has to be, because there's enough middle ground that people get distracted. I think it's the number one thing we need to do is regreen the planet. I live on essentially what was once a farm. It's no longer a farm, but the landlady keeps a pony on these 3 or 4 fields, and I want to cover them in trees. I want to live inside a forest, but she wants to keep these things open for this horse. So you have to have these 3 fields so that the horse can get enough grass. And of course, the grass does not support enough biodiversity to really, become a carbon sink or anything like that. Even something like a meadow, if she would do that. But this is the thinking. Another thing that comes up for me is, I don't know if you've ever seen it, but occasionally I see aspects of it or a little bit of it. There's a TV show called My 600 Pound Life. And it's a documentary essentially, and it catalogs the lives of all these different people as they go along for counseling and to see if they can get tummy tucks and sort of weight reduction surgery from this one particular guy, this doctor. Some of them don't make it. You can coax them and coerce them and say, come on. And they often have structures whereby the entire extended family is continually bringing them food. So it's this kind of thing that they're too into it. And some of them die. They say, 3 months after we filmed this, she just died. She didn't make it. It's a bit like that. However, just to finish that off, I would say that it's an easier choice point than we think. Because the first thing you got to do is accept that you can make a choice. We are continually browbeaten with the ideas that we cannot make a choice, that we have to accept what has been given to us. Well, we can't save the planet because obviously we got wars to fight and, we've got video games to play and we've got flights and holidays to Turkey to take. So obviously it'd be nice if we did, but we can't. So sorry about that. It just takes a change of mind. I had a conversation with my parents' neighbor a couple of years ago, and we were having dinner, and I mentioned this thing about the idea of voluntarily people limiting themselves to breeding only one time, whether it be male or female. Like once you've done it, once you've partaken, within 20 years we'll have everything back on track. That's the amount of sacrifice that might take place. And he laughed into his plates and he shook his head and he said, nope, never going to happen. Never going to happen. And I was at the same time crestfallen. But then I realized, well, look, that's just his reality engine. That's just somebody else's version of reality, which essentially is an idea taken off a kind of the ideas supermarket shelf. It's not something that's really been deeply thought about. It's just a kind of submission to this is the way it is. There's nothing we can do. I'm suggesting we simply make a decision. And if you decide to become something and you decide on it deeply enough and with real enough conviction, then you become that idea. Then you express that. And I believe that's actually the main point of one of our other topics. Maybe we should dip onto the next reading because it's somewhere in that. What else do we have? We've done Manowar, realistic.
Yeah. I was just about to start you off on your next thing, but I just wanted to summarize by saying, for those who haven't read the book, that this really is a book that ultimately speaks to you. In a direct way. It says you must make a choice and you are allowed to do this. And it's almost a dialogue between you and the reader.
It's a dialogue also, excuse me for interrupting, but it's a dialogue that between me and me. It's finally someone giving me permission, having had a lifetime of not being given permission. I figured that's one thing that's missing from the cocktail of people's lives is permission to be themselves. And everyone can choose it, but we're so browbeaten that we think our decisions are somehow probably not as good as the ones as other people have, or they were told in school. We're encouraged not to really be authentic and say what we really think. So
And on that note, I think we're going to springboard into the next passage, which is Placebo.
Okay. Placebo, right. Here we go. Every single one of us is an atomic magician loading specialized torque onto the pliable fabric of reality in order to generate focused conditions. Intention, conviction, and commitment play large parts in the process of shaping the qualities of the ever-present moment. Outcomes are affected at light speed. Concepts are chosen and shaped by the hallucinatory elegance of imagination. Just making a sandwich is a crystallization of billions of nodes of purposeful connectivity, which allow for it all to come together as a coherent gesture in space-time. A gesture. The lensing chamber presents the sandwich as a holographic token. Holograms like you don't need to eat. They're made of light. And yet, believing as we do in the third dimension, a sandwich is a necessary piece of holographic machinery. It is a symbolic focus for the process it describes. Once the holographic sandwich has been symbolically joined with the holographic human, the human can then persevere with the biological experience. The gesture produces an outcome. A gesture is performed by focused thinking into a three-dimensional manifestation chamber. Just like magic, the avatar eats a sandwich in 3D. It's a transaction we have daily with our environment. As a symbolic procedure, it signifies our willingness to persevere with the human condition. It means you continue waking up here each morning. It is not a phenomenon limited to the human domain by any means. Every new and full moon, every misty mountaintop, every leaf on every tree is a descriptive gesture formed over eons of combinations of gestures. Gestures generated by the desire of the universe. How is this related to a placebo? The placebo is inert. However, the placebo generates a blaze of connected activity around it based on its symbolic presence. The hologram is valueless, but it functions as a depictor of symbolic values. When a person is unwell, an inert pill is often enough to accelerate their recovery through anticipation alone, a reason to live. A placebo is exactly this. Finding this reason to live is characterized in the human cerebrum by a release of feel-good brain drug dopamine. Biology follows the desire line. Our chosen thoughts are originators of our brain chemistry. Just like a clock runs on cogs, the concept it shows is time. The reason for the existence of cogs in the clock is a measurement of time for which they are designed. In the same way, Brain chemistry was designed for the magic that we do with it. We wished for a universe of vision and evolved the brain pan drenched with exotic hallucinogens with which to grip the realm of ideas. The desire line we chose materialized a 3D chemical frequency portal which we carry around at the top of the human spinal cord. The atomic magician waves a wand and thought becomes reality. The placebo allows space for action through thought alone, the light touch of the holographic human. The road home is lit up on the map, and optimism returns as the realization dawns that it's just a matter of walking there. It's an idea. That's what I wanted to say with that passage, was that as soon as you make the decision, as soon as you ground that decision, like the supermassive black hole, it's an area of concentrated matter, so thick and so dense and so deep that it's indistinguishable from infinity. It's infinite collapse that happens in a black hole. That if you focus your ideas on that and are unperturbed, and this is not new information. If you're single-minded on something, you can get something done. But if you're looking at it from the point of we want to bring the entire human experience to a point of clarity, ultimately, so that we can either just live here and hang out in our boxer shorts and enjoy the sunshine and do not much else except, eat tomatoes and have sex, or whatever the future human wants to do with its human body. Because essentially we're sending the humans down the mines, we're sending them to work in nuclear reactors, we're keeping them in poverty, we're not being very considerate. The shift would be simply to become as kind as you can and have that be your locus, that be your terminus, your starting point and your end point. Then the decisions are much easier. For example, right now, with the world doing what it's doing, we couldn't see an end to business as it was. People flying all over the planet to attend meetings and this happening. Companies were saying it's going to take us 4 or 5 years to implement the necessary technology and functioneering in order to do our business at a distance, in order to have people work from home, essentially. Now we've got that accomplished. I don't know what it was, like a 2-week period, maybe. Suddenly 4 or 5 years of it can't be done manifested. Everything was there. Zoom was there. The internet was there. Facebook, all the rest of it. Skype was all ready for this to happen. So I do sense that it has been masterminded by the overmind or the oversoul of humanity. This is one vast human, all proceeding its way towards a point of clarity somehow. And it's moving. I mean, 2012 happened, and that was a very big year for me, and things were qualitatively different after that. I felt though somehow that, well, plus I was 41 at that stage and I'm now 48. So as you get older, things mature in your ability to sort of dissect them and see what they were doing. But there is far more clarity now, and far more of a sense of real people out there talking to each other, like you and me, and our point of view is valid. We're used to being marginalized, but we need not be marginalized any longer. It turns out, as you get older, it's another thing that happens. I mean, I'm looking at these people who run the country, and some of them are younger than me. Some of them are the kind of idiots I went to school with, and I wouldn't trust them with the board rubber. It's like these are just people, and they're very specifically tuned. Their own thinking procedures have been tuned to present us with this situation. What we're being presented with in symbolic form, on a scale of 7.5 billion individuals all witnessing it, is the great decision which we have to make, which, when you boil it right down, is, do we want to be here or do we want to not be here? Now, I'm not suggesting that we all, fly off and go kill ourselves and go and sit on the next comet that goes by and we're all going to leave the planet like that. Not that. I mean, we finally become comfortable with ourselves. We have this itch as a species that we just cannot scratch. And the more we try and scratch it, the worse the itch gets. It's going to require some very specific management. There's a chapter in the book called Psycho, which goes a little bit more into the way we need to look at this, the structure of what people are doing, this use it up and throw it away idea and push and bully that humans tend to do. This is the behavior of an addict. This is the behavior of somebody who, this is what the feeling on the planet at the moment is, that the addict is about to go into cold turkey. All of the things which usually would be a nice little distraction, a bit of extra money, all the security and the power and the status and all these things that have run our hierarchies are now looking pretty naked. They do not have the fuel which they formerly had, simply by people's consent. So there's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing I can say. I don't make any difference. You know, you get beaten down in school, and you eventually, because it's the whole system is set up like Stockholm syndrome, you develop a system of dealing with the overlords, whether it be your school teachers or your parents or your boss or the government or whoever it is. We're all sitting here going, none of this is acceptable. We're all faking this idea that life is for the living. And so looking at adverts on the TV extolling you the virtues of buying this new car or taking a holiday to the Caribbean or whatever it is. Inside, people are going nuts. And I use that term, let's be careful about that term. I don't like it when people are cavalier with the term, because it is mental illness. It's not lockdown, which is causing people to have these difficulties, these psychological difficulties. It's the life that we've been living right up until now, and suddenly you're in a quiet spot, and we just cannot make ends meet with all of the chaos that has gone on, because we've been clinging to ideas about what the right kind of life is to live and what you should do with your time. And it turns out that all of them have been exposed. Just one more thing to finish that off. I was listening to something this morning which was talking about Diogenes. And you know about Diogenes. He was Greek. I don't know when he lived exactly, but he was famous for living in a barrel, because he was one of the Cynic philosophers. And he was just like, it's all bullshit. But he was very famous, and it turns out that, you know, he just used to live a very public life. You know, he used to eat and shit and masturbate in his barrel in the public square or whatever it was. But because he was regarded as being, you know, a shining light. In fact, one of the things that's said about him is that he walked around with a lantern looking for an honest man. But the thing I wanted to tell you about is that he, at some point, was in his barrel, and the local king, emperor, whatever it was, came round, and of course they like to show themselves up. We support the arts, of course we do. Let me go and see this guy in his barrel. And he stood there saying, well, isn't it marvelous you doing this? It's super, isn't it? And is there anything that I can do for you? And Diogenes looks up and says, yeah, you can get out of the way. You're blocking the sunlight. This is the kind of spirit, I think. Now, the cynical, he was a cynic, but we've come to use cynical as being someone who goes, oh, that's rubbish, it's bullshit, you can't do that. It's not that. You're simply saying what doesn't work and highlighting what doesn't work. This is the key to, for me, to evolving. You're not adding a new character of spiritual person or meditator or person who drinks ayahuasca. You're removing the accreted layers of kind of crusty stuff that the process of becoming human has left upon our skins. Now, at some point, we went from the animal realm, and as McKenna would have it, at some point, we stopped eating the magic mushrooms that were growing off the plains of Africa while following our herds of cattle around, and dipped into the world of hierarchies and usury and ego. I think we're approaching a point now where we can actually use the context of all this ego nonsense, looking at history, because no one's learning from history at the moment, but somehow we can consolidate it and distill it. And I think what will be left behind after the distillation process is what you always were at the beginning. So, the primal light, the first thing that you are, a frequency, a realm of electrons. I think that's what we need to be. And I think that's what we're all headed towards, whether we like it or not. And it's just a matter of the kind of weaving that we do. I think that's what Celtic knotwork was about. When you see it ascribing the borders of various different manuscripts, which have been illuminated in monasteries over the years, you see this story. It's like the snake going in and out and in and out. You can't really make head or tail of what you should condemn and what you should be grateful for. It's all part of the magic. Okay, that's the end of that.
I'm going to add a coda to your story. It was Alexander the Great in the version that I heard.
Was it?
And after Diogenes said, "Please move out of the way," after he was offered anything in the kingdom of Alexander the Great, which was the biggest empire in the world at the time, and he said, "Yes, you can do something for me. Get out of the way." Alexander the Great is rumored to have said, "If I were not Alexander, I would be Diogenes." And that brings us back to really where we are, which is, do we want to be Alexander or do we want to be Diogenes? Because right now, every Alexander on the planet, bar a few, has become Diogenes. They're sitting in their back garden. They're cooking their own soup. They're learning how to clean a toilet.
It's the great humbling, isn't it? Yeah.
There is no hierarchy anymore. Whether that will maintain direction like that, or whether we will revert to a new hierarchy based on who knows what, social distancing is yet to be seen. But
it's a fascinating scenario. The hierarchies are disappearing, and suddenly your food delivery guy and the nurse, who were basic, something got stuck to your bottom of your shoe previously. Now they are the heroes. Now they are the ones keeping it all together, and they don't even have. For the food delivery guys, they're on 0-hour contracts. They've got no pension plans. These are the people that are actually doing stuff rather than just manipulating things from behind their computers at a distance. That will come to an end. I think the idea of people being massively wealthy and it being okay, all hierarchies surely must collapse. I mean, look at the royal families and the knighthood ideas. If you got lots of money, you'll get a knighthood. Like, what's that about? I think we're just going to have to get. People won't stand for it anymore. We're realizing that we all have value somehow. We all have our own inherent value, and it's just a matter of clarifying it. I think also in terms of my life, I'm realizing that the chaos that was my life up until fairly recently, I was responsible for it. Yeah, we were all responsible for our lives, but I was running off all kinds of just deficient programming which had been created for the purpose of building businesses and running banks and being British, and the school I went to was definitely part of the whole. I think it was founded in 1862. It was a Victorian institution, and there were still some hangovers from that, where it was all, we're training the sons of gentlemen to go out to the world and go and become captains of industry or captains of the army and go and expand the empire and all that kind of stuff. I think that is just, it's always been ludicrous, but I think it's obvious that it's ludicrous now. So I think we're in a good place. I like what's happening. I'm very pleased. Sorry about all the deaths and everyone and all that stuff, but I'm very pleased with this virus. It is it's a holographic construct that has emerged from the genome of life on planet Earth and is specifically adapted to humans. It's part of us. It's the regulating process. It is the thing which we have engineered that would eventually kick in and stop the execution of the planet. It's still going on, of course. The Amazon is still being ripped apart, but it's going to take people like you and me being vocal and being convinced as well, and realizing that all of the intimidation that comes from people saying be realistic, whether it's politics or money, whatever it is, they still do not have a leg to stand on. The one thing we need to do is replanting. Look at all of the We're already employing vast amounts of people, for example, armies and navies and whatnot, to go and be in the countryside and go on week-long camping trips with their guns and whatever. We're already employing them to do that. Could we not just sort of include some tree planting in that? We have a lot of jobs. A lot of people need jobs, and we're still trying to support the jobs. Obviously, just a money-making thing, and they destroy a lot of material, and they disrespect people. We're trying to reboot that version of economies. And all economies do is destroy rainforests. So we're going to have to think of a different reason to live. This is the placebo idea. Think of a different reason to live. All you need is a few sandwiches a day, or something like that. You don't need a Ferrari. You don't need any of this stuff. The key is to be here now, the lightness of being a human. You don't find out what it is until you've let all that stuff go, because it's never enough. And I'm finding that broke as I am freer than I have ever been. No one bothers to contact me because I've got nothing worth taking anymore. And the quality of my life has gone up, 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 up. It's this idea of having nothing to do. I think everyone's getting a taste of that, and they're going, "Oh, this is fantastic. I love this idea." I mean, all of the suppositions about what life was supposed to be about, it turns out they were just stories passed on by one person to another person, and no one has ever sat and looked it in the face and said, what do I actually want to do? Except for one other person. Well, several others, but the one I say one other because it's one more thing that I want to say about. I'd like to do a reading about the Bodhi tree. It's on 458. Let me get to it. And this is essentially the story. Well, I won't go into it too much, but the story of Siddhartha. Siddhartha was essentially a prince, I seem to remember. He was from a rich family, and he was given all the best things, and he was contained within beautiful gardens, and his family had lots of money and land. But he was unsure of what was going on outside, and eventually went outside and left his safe environment behind. And he saw the poverty. He saw the people dying on the street. He saw the anguish of people running their lives and having families and trying to run businesses and all this stuff. And he says, oh my goodness, the suffering. So he was so convinced that he wanted clarification on this, that he sat down under the Bodhi tree and said, right, I am not leaving this spot until either I am enlightened or I'm dead. Either way is fine. That's how much we need to bring to the job of being okay with how we are here, and creating a world that we actually want to live in. So this Siddhartha eventually became the Buddha nature. So this is that incarnation of Buddha was in that individual, which came down from giving up, just saying, I'm not going to do this anymore. So that's the background to this. Let me just find the correct spot.
Now, while you're looking for that, the quote that I think caps the discussion we've had about biology and business is this: if we want to salvage the biology of this planet, we will have to admit as a species that our industries must close, our financial institutions must fail, our territories, hierarchies, and monopolies must be surrendered. And that was the quote that you posted up with the financial crash, just as it was coming into play in February the 20th. And I mean, it seems to be happening, as you say, but it seems to be happening by sort of unconscious default, like the eggs of a marathon runner sort of giving out in an uncoordinated way, presumably in order to stop the heart giving out.
Yes.
Overstrain.
That's nicely done. Yeah, well spotted. Okay. That's good.
Yeah.
It's exactly that.
And while you're looking, tell me when you're ready. But I went to Africa over the winter break, so the winter of 2019, beginning 2020, and I was quite shocked in Kalani Safari Park in Eswatini. to be reading the brochure on the endangered rhino species, as you do, because we've heard this message for so long, 20, 30, 40 years, whatever, probably longer. But, as long as I've been conscious, the message from the World Wildlife Fund and that lot coming out. And to be sort of halfway down page 1 or page 2 of this leaflet in the hall while I was waiting, to read that one of the species had gone extinct in 2018. And
is that the northern white?
I think it was the two-horn.
Oh, okay, yeah. One of them has gone extinct. I know, and we just watch it, and still there are American dentists paying, $50,000 to go and kill things like this, like Cecil the lion. We still have that idea, that utterly ridiculous, that these people feel that they are helping conservation by paying $50,000 to go and kill some endangered species. I cannot compute. It's utterly shocking.
But I think for me, just coming in with a personal perspective, it was the difference between something is going to happen, likely to happen, and something has happened. And I think the idea of planetary collapse, whether it's climate change or deforestation or biodiversity collapse or endangered species, has been pushed towards us by the media for so long that we have just got it on our list of things to sort out at some point, right? It's the roof or the dishwasher that sort of rattles. And it's like, nobody really disagrees, apart from maybe the guy who shot the lion in that media story. But nobody really disagrees that we're going to have to get around to it at some point. And for me, it was very firmly in that box of, definitely, absolutely serious issue, right? Okay, it's on my list of serious issues. You still take the tube to work, or you do whatever you do. And then you sort of get to the 6th line or the 20th line in this leaflet, and you see it's over. And it must be almost the equivalent, no disrespect to anyone listening, of the sort of the amputation point when people have smoked too much or something, and the doctor, well, look, we have to take your leg. And there must be a moment in a lot of those discussions where they say, well, what if I just stop smoking now? And the answer is, it's too late. The leg goes anyway. And so the rhino species has gone anyway. And, the next thing is the planet. That's what a lot of people are saying. And so I think it's interesting to see that choice point almost becoming live now in the midst of this virus debate.
Yes. Well, I actually have a cure for this. Well, I don't know about cure, but see how I can describe this. We're going to need to have, it's not a matter of legislating against people shooting rhinos. We need to have a complete reset of the human sort of why are we here and what we're doing kind of structure. And one of the things I'm thinking of implementing, at least in my own life, and I'll try and infect various other people with it, is placing a ban on the future, just as a concept. Because, okay, we all know that all you have is now. Yeah, all you have is now. Now, if you want a great future, make a great now. Keep making the now great, and keep doing it great. Keep now great, and then by default, the future becomes great. It doesn't happen just on its own accord or later. It doesn't happen later. The future has become a place where people put stuff they don't want to deal with. For example, the whole concept of debt, financial debt. It's money for one person today, and then there's this kind of nebulous sort of area where money will come in over the next 30 years, and you're pretty much locked into it. It's supposing that everything's going to be fine for the next 20, 30 years, that we will have businesses. Like the very fact that banks are loaning money, where they get the money from, and they just make it up essentially at some point. But that they are still making loans based on people needing to pay them back with planet-destroying activity. We can't do that. We have to admit that if you want something done, we're going to have to do it today. We're going to have to actually go out and dig in the soil and put a little tree in the ground and go, there, I planted my tree for the day. This is actually something that people have to do. We could reforest the planet in an afternoon, really, if everyone was into it. But people don't think that they need to. There's somebody else who's going to do that, or we'll do it later. This entire concept of doing it later is what has got us into difficulties. And the concept of time and time travel, there's a few things I want to say about that, but I think we'll save it for another time. I found the section that I was going to read to you. Are you ready for me to do that one?
Just before you do,
yeah.
I just want to throw an interesting statistic. This just struck me. So the British government says it's going to spend 350 billion on this bailout scheme. And I've calculated that if it were to cost in raw materials like compost and seed, a pound per tree planted. If 10 billion people, the entirety of the planet, planted a new tree a day for a month, it would cost the British government, if they paid for the entire scheme, 300 billion, which is less than what they're spending on the coronavirus bailout. So I think you have suggestions for the next budget. It's cheaper than what we're doing at the moment.
Exactly. It's all cheaper. It's all cheaper. This is the ridiculous thing. It's all cheaper and easier. So as soon as you've made the hardest part is making the decision. And it can't be done with coercion. It has to come from inside each person. They go, oh, this is the answer, rather than being trained to fight for what you want, or your family, or your country, or my wealth, my future. I want to do. No. It's going to require an entirely different kind of surrender. And there's plenty we could do on the economics of doing the right thing. Yes,
but I think it is obvious, and we're having this great British baking revolution where people are realizing that the cost of a pizza is about 30p of flour and a pound of mozzarella. But it's an interesting equation. Just before we go into the body treat, to be thinking, well, what could you do with, say, a £10,000 check if you were just securing just what you need for the future? And I don't know about you, but I went and stockpiled, for better or worse. And I mean, I bought tens of kilos worth of food. I'm staring at a 10-kilo bag of rice, which hasn't been touched. And there's 2 points. There's 2 points. One is, it's actually quite disturbing how much food NASA says that a space person needs a day. But we discounted that by thinking that might include water weight, the 3 kilos a day.
Yeah.
But the other side of it is the disproportionate scales of economics that go from, sort of enough food to get through the day, which is sort of lentils and rice at a cost of 30p or 50p or something, and the high amounts that one spends in restaurants or bars or something in central London, where you're on scales of maybe 100 to 1 in terms of the actual sort of relative cost of these things. And if you were to wind that back, and I'm not saying it is doable, but you were to wind that back to how much people need to go out and work, how much people need to go out and destroy the planet for their well-being. Do we wind it all back by a scale of 100 to 1? Say, yeah, okay, chop a tree down, but just chop one tree down today, not 100. It's like spoonfuls of Nutella that my boy would have. If he weren't monitored, he'd have 100 spoonfuls of Nutella, but one might be enough. So now we're going to the body tree.
This is a short one. Okay. Let's start here. Okay. I refer to him as the Bodhi one here. The Bodhi one did not die, nor did he starve, nor was he forgotten. He became a living doorway, beloved of those whose time was near, just like you. The process of preparing seems to require time for quiet consideration. The drama of life becomes a fruitless, indecipherable endeavor. Yet sitting under that Bodhi tree, you are fulfilling every desire, every prophecy, every longing that humanity has ever dreamed of. Nothing to do, nothing to hold on to, nothing to expect. That is the required state of being for the event horizon. Empty-headed. That's all I wanted to say on that bit in terms of reading it. This idea of having nothing, of relinquishing everything, your identity, who you think you are. Humans have evolved out of billions of years of universal process. And we're walking around in these elongated bodies with identities, and we think we're male or female or a son or a daughter or a father or a mother. All of these things are essentially just kind of fairly blunt tools which we use to go in and have an experience in the three-dimensional world. But we are not those things, and these are the aspects, the characteristics, the kind of the clothing that an actor would take off at the end of the performance. And it just keeps going deeper and deeper as you remove more and more of the clothing of who you thought you were and the purposes of your being on the earth. Things get lighter, and you do end up getting happier. You do end up seeing just a clarification of your world. I think this is the direction we all need to be going. Just stop trying to be somebody. Essentially, and I know that I have to be somebody in order to form the vocalizations and record them and get them through the computer and get other people to listen to them. This is the whole thing we're doing. But the idea is to remove yourself. Is the kind of, look, I don't want to be anything more than the guy who opens the door in the illusion and says, by the way, the exit is in this direction. There was a moment in the movie Total Recall where I can't remember exactly what happens, but it's the one with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and somebody from the company comes into his dream, but it turns out he was sweating or something, and it's wait a second, you're not in the dream. And I can't remember what the deal was, but essentially the illusion of the story that was going on was shattered by somebody going in and tapping them on the shoulder. And seeing as we're talking about that, we may as well talking about relay the story of the deities and the trough. Seeing as we're live like this is I don't know where it came from, and I have not been able to find it or which ones the deities were, but I think they were Hindu deities. And this is the story whereby there's these two deities. Of course, it's India, so they have a cattle trough. It's probably like a rainbow trough with crystalline things for the unicorns or whatever. But this is like Hindu deity land, and they've got a trough. And these two deities are having a discussion about what it is to be human, what it is to be in the third dimensional form. And they come to a point where they don't agree with each other about the nature of the experience. So the one who's pretty sure about how it works takes the other one's head and dips it into the trough. And as soon as that one's head goes under the cosmic water, being a god gets left behind, and this individual's consciousness is put into a limited human being. Now, the limited human being that he's put into has a story, has a life, ends up having a family and, businesses, and becomes something big in the community, and is eventually elected to do this, that, and the other, and has some responsibilities for the people. And it's a very involved process. And eventually at some point there's a war that's happening, and he has to summon a bunch of guys to go and fight some other guys. And he's about to go and kill when suddenly the other deity pulls him up out of the drinking trough and says, see, you completely forgot that you were a deity. And the deity whose head was underwater goes, it was so real. I got completely caught up into it. I was about to kill a guy. I seriously was. I understand. I get it. This is a zone of forgetfulness. This is a realm where it's easy to get caught up in who you think you are. But, as Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. This is who we are. My role now, and I think everybody's role, should be to be the character that taps you on the shoulder inside your dream and says, listen, I don't want you to freak out because I know it's all really important and shit, but I need you to stop believing in all of this, and gradually just sort of gesture towards the open door and say, it's time for us to recede from the three-dimensional human experience, whatever form that takes, I don't know. But life suddenly becomes not such a burden, and you're not pressed into servicing the illusory world in the way that you were. That's
this is
go ahead.
Tying in, I think, to the last passage that we've got on our list for today, which is the word.
Okay, 194.
Word. So it's not me, perhaps, with the Bible, but word, page 194. Let's have a listen to that.
Okay.
And see if that fits into some of the science that you've alluded to.
Let's see. Word. The holographic human is a communication device. It generates and receives fields of frequencies. Coinciding wavelengths create the standing wave. Choice and intention make the holographic human a modulator and a transponder. We choose the message, we analyze, encipher, and decipher the message. Then we become the message we have chosen. By the election of message, the landscape of manifested holography is altered. The things you think make reality be what it is. The ideas you say are the condensed distillate of what you think. The manner and tone with which you say them defines the authenticity of the message. Having been hijacked by suspect ideologies your entire life, your ability to trust what you feel has been obscured. Your capacity to speak authentically has been compromised. You've been talking all your life, but what have you been saying? Some of what you've said is repeating the message of others. That is the nature of the culture, the nature of resonance. Inhabiting your own message, your own set of frequencies, is the only authentic way to perform the function of a holographic human. Only you know what your message is. However, when you attempt to give voice to the exquisite harmonies you see and feel as a light being, the message becomes immediately corrupted. The words you speak never seem to do justice to the idea behind them. The perfection of the idea becomes profane when you attempt to talk about it. Rather than conjuring of light fields, the verbalizations appear blunt and indistinct. When you come to express it, the message is an abbreviation. We feel ourselves to be misunderstood, frustrated by the inability to clarify the internal complexity and verbalize it. We are pressed by the urge to communicate, but dejected by the inefficiency of the tools we have. However, it's just a matter of altering the focus point. Once the message is fine-tuned in hyperspace, the entire holography of your being will be a channel for that message. This is all done without saying a word. When you eventually do come to the point of speaking an idea, it will have the clarity and gravitas of the holography which generated it. This is referring to, again, this idea that if you center yourself, if you hold a terminal locus or a starting point, just a single point, a singularity inside you, then you become that message. Then you become the voice of biological flow. It's much easier to see where things are dragging and causing problems and causing pain. We all think that we have to cause that as just a byproduct of living and being here. The suffering is a normal part. I don't think we have to. I think if you focus upon as clear an idea of gentle experience and existence in a three-dimensional location, then we will find it without having to complicate it with all the unnecessary extras. So the idea here I'm trying to explain is that by thinking, that is the word, that is the ideas which you hold inside you will necessarily emanate into the air around you and the people you find yourself with. And you can actually do your proselytizing and being your urge to sort of regreen the planet simply by thinking it. Because everybody is an electrochemical human being. We are all picking up on the resonances of everybody's personalities and the flavors of their construction unconsciously. We don't know we're doing it. We might say it's a mood, or I get a certain vibe off a person, but we're reading people continuously. When people read nothing to fear from you and only the best, and looking for completion, and also a sense of love and joy and tenderness, they will resonate with that. They will be drawn towards you. You don't have to tell them to be good. You just have to be that person. You don't have to tell them that they don't need to argue about this or the other. Simply showing up with a smile on your face seems to be enough of a word. Now, I'm suggesting that you do this all the time. There are obviously circumstances where you need to be a bitch and you need to shout. There are certain times when that happens, but less and less. I'm finding that you can, they say about great masters that, you can tell when they walk in the room, you can tell when they come to the city because everything changes. Suddenly their aura has expanded to the area around you, and you feel a sense of, okay, this is the portal where certain things get accomplished. I don't see why that kind of aura, that kind of internal announcement cannot be inside everybody's heart. This is something that you're an heir to it just by the nature of being a human. You have absolutely all of the requirements to be the focus of at least your life. And if you're being the focus of your life, then you are doing your job. Then you are being your part of the great jigsaw. And you may be walking around with half of a bit of a seagull's wing saying, this is rubbish, I've got a shit life, I've got half of a bit of a seagull's wing. But when you put it into the context with all the others, you would have fucked up by the picture by not being half of a bit of a seagull's wing. That was exactly what was needed. And so your best expression of being that thing is the one thing you can do. And I think it's the most, how can I say, illuminating. I'm talking about emancipating. That's what I want to say. It's the most emancipating thing you can do, is just to get rid of who you think you are and what you think you're doing. And of course, the best medicine that I've come across to at least instill that or clarify it in your mind and get it out of the subconscious mind is large doses of natural hallucinogens. And that, I think, will have to be the subject of another talk. How are we doing? We've got an hour and a half there. Does that sound about right for you? Well, it looks like we've lost Alastair. So I'm going to end the podcast here.
I'm sorry. I've been on mute, a respectful mute.
I see.
But just thinking that, just reminding as we close of a wonderful line by Sixto Rodriguez, known as the Sugar Man, in the film Searching for Sugar Man, which drills it home how much of you is repetition. And now's the time for streaming out all the repetition in our minds and in our psyches, and just getting to the point where we're actually responding to the reality of our situation. Because Be Here Now has never been as easy, I think, or pleasant, or relevant, or unrestricted, at least not in the last sort of 20, 30 years of our adult lifetimes. And so this is the tone for the new era. So the book is Freemaking, second book in the series, Hologenics being the first, and the author is Aurel Lyra.
Thank you very much. I think actually we're probably gonna have a second session, because we have the baboons of Kikarok to talk about, and that will spin off into the alpha males of Kikarok, which sounds like an episode of Star Trek, but it's not.
Tune in for the second podcast to be released soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
for hosting this. Thanks. I really appreciate it. I'm very glad that we could have this time together. All right. I'll see you next time.
That's a wrap.
Bye for now.
Bye.